Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming back to my YouTube channel. My name is Liz. I am your money mentor online, and I take seriously the idea of FIRE. So today I want to talk about lean FIRE. FIRE is not blowing up a house, but we're talking about financial independence, retire early. Okay, so there are different types of FIRE. We've talked about fat FIRE, and today we're going to talk about lean FIRE, and there will be other videos about different types of FIRE. So what is lean FIRE? Lean FIRE is being able to retire before the standard time of 65, but it also means living the equivalent of a minimalist lifestyle. So living the equivalent of a minimalist lifestyle on a very low budget. So what does that mean in reality for someone like yourself? If you chose to do lean FIRE, it means that you would be able to retire early, but you'd still have to, because what you'd have would be only enough to cover things like your basics, okay? So your bills, your rent or your mortgage, and maybe your food and transportation, okay? But that leaves you in a position where you're probably still gonna have to find a way to supplement your income or live on a very, very tight or extreme budget. Let's dig deeper into how that works and examples of how you could actually get into lean FIRE if this is something you want to do. Okay, so people who are working or living in a lean FIRE environment, they have to supplement their income, like I said before. So that might mean getting a part-time job or doing some multi-level marketing or something like that that would add a little bit of income that would cover things beyond their basics and maybe into the luxuries. Okay, but the idea here is that there are very little luxuries when it comes to lean. Okay, we find that people who work on lean FIRE or who are okay doing lean FIRE, they don't have to work as many hours, but they do have to work somewhat to be able to cover something beyond their basic. If you look at my video here, you'll notice that lean FIRE is the exact opposite of fat FIRE. With fat FIRE, you look at that video here that I just pointed to, remember the idea there is to live to the max. Lean FIRE is actually the opposite. You're living to the minimum. You do extreme things to ensure that you don't overspend. Okay, so it's a bit of a challenge there, and it's definitely not for everyone. I'll tell you this, it's not for me, but there are in reality people who do this very well. Some people live off-grid. Some people live in smaller properties than they need to. Some people live in caravans. It's totally up to them, and it's a choice. But you know, it's something that can be done. So let's look at some examples of how people can actually live lean FIRE in today's day, okay? So if, for example, in the UK, one of the things you could probably do is go ahead and live in a cramped studio or in a minivan or not a minivan, in a caravan, okay? That's an option. So that's a very low cost. You find that some people might actually be able to live in that studio just fine or live in that van as needed, but there are challenges to living in a caravan. For example, heating might be an issue, you know, toiletries might be an issue. Of course, you have to go hook up in a caravan park to be able to do some of those things legally. Those are challenges, and that's not something everybody wants to do. But if you're determined enough, ladies and gentlemen, you certainly can. Now, I remember when I used to have a daycare, one of my teachers used to come in, and she told me, she was like, Miss Lydia, they used to call me Miss Lydia, I live in a caravan and it's paid for. She said, I have no mortgage, I have no rent, and I live in this caravan and that's where I live. I was like, that's pretty cool. I said, so you have no expenses in terms of, you know, where you live and rent or mortgage? She's like, no, I paid it off and I don't have to pay a mortgage anymore unless I sell it and I need somewhere else to live. Now that was pretty cool. So lean FIRE, for example, is not something that is uncommon, not just in the States, but also here. People do it and they don't even know, right? So this is something that's 100% doable if that is your choice, but it has to be a choice and it's very much a commitment. Another option with lean FIRE, and I'm sure parents who are watching this will be very upset with me, but you can live with your parents, okay? Speaking to one of my friends the other day, we chatted about it and the empty nest and how it would work. And, you know, we see it all the time where people don't want to leave their parents' homes anymore, folks. We get it, okay? But it is an option in terms of enhancing your ability to live lean, but it's not a permanent solution, guys. You can't live with your parents till you're 50. We would not encourage it, at least in our household, but it's not a realistic option. At some point, you do have to fly that nest. However, it is an option to help you save to get to that place where you are able to sustain yourself with less money. So that might be a roadmap, part of the roadmap that you go on, but it's definitely not a permanent solution coming from a parent, ladies and gentlemen. One of the other things that you need with Lean Fire is obviously subsidized healthcare. So in the UK, you can actually just live off of the NHS. Now, there are long waiting lists, we know that, and there are challenges sometimes getting particular types of healthcare. So I would just say, this is something that you should take very seriously. And if you choose to do subsidized healthcare, like most of us do in the UK, just bear in mind that there are risks. Okay. Now, one of the things that I find fascinating is the discrepancy or the different ranges of house prices in the UK. This is so interesting, and it's the same in the US and probably everywhere else in the world. It might cost you X amount to live in London, but guess what? If you move up to Birmingham or Manchester or even Scotland, your prices are going to go so much, much lower, because the cost of living in London and the outer area of London is so much higher than the rest of the country. So if you choose, for example, to move away from London and go further afield, Lincoln, Lincolnshire, wherever you want to go, those are places where house prices are so much cheaper. Okay, so that is a way, for example, to do Lean Fire, to move to a place or part of the country where the cost of living is less than London, for example. Okay, so that's definitely doable. In the UK, in the US, for example, we know that up north the prices are a lot more higher compared to the south and the southeast of the US. So those are other options as well. For example, I lived in the southeast of the US, and house prices there were like half the price of New York or other places. But I would definitely recommend doing this, especially if you're getting started on the property ladder. Knowing that you can actually buy property in a place that is a little less expensive, even if it means moving away from where your friends are for a little bit of time. And then you can rent it out probably and come back if you choose to, right? But that is a way of getting onto the property ladder. And also by living Lean Fire, where you can actually move to somewhere in the country that is a little bit cheaper than London. The next one, the next way that people with Lean Fire tends to work is not being able to save up. So if you are living on a very, very tight budget, you might struggle to save. You might struggle to increase your savings. You might struggle to have that emergency fund because you're living on such a tight budget. So this is something that is doable, like I said, but having an emergency fund is something that I always recommend. If you find yourself in a place where you haven't got a job or your income decreases significantly, having an emergency fund is really not an option. It's not optional, ladies and gentlemen. This is something I want to encourage everybody to do. So 3 months, 6 months, however many months you can set aside, try to do it. But Lean Fire might mean that you might not be able to make those savings, not necessarily just for your emergency fund, but for other things. So kids' university, other things like insurance, etc. Those are things that you want to make sure that you have in place, but it can be challenging if you're doing Lean Fire. So another option is to live very simply or as simply as possible. So there's the option of living off grid. So you choose to live somewhere where you are off grid and you're not having to pay significant bills or those kind of things. We see that a lot in the US and some here as well in the UK. But that is an option. Living off grid to minimize your costs means that you don't have any relationship with, for example, with British Gas because you burn fire on your stove, or you potentially have other options where you're literally living with no bills because you have ways of ensuring that you are kept warm, kept able to shower, etc. So those are options as well, living off grid. Not something that I would do, like I said before, but it's definitely an option. Now, obviously, there's nothing wrong with Lean Fire, but I do think it's definitely not for the faint-hearted, and it's something that only certain people can do. I know that I can't live a Lean Fire life. I know that for sure. But if you feel that this is something for you, hop on into the comments and let's talk about it. Let's see what you think about it and tell us how it is you go about living lean. So what does it take to be lean financially? So this is important because this is going to differ from everybody. For example, if you live in London, trying to live lean fire is actually going to be way more expensive than if you're living in Scotland or Wales or Birmingham. Those are areas that have lower standards of lower costs of living rather. So this is something that we all need to try to assess. There is data out there on what it takes to live with a particular amount of income for example, the size of your family. Let's say, for example, you have 4 children. How much would that cost for you to do lean? You need to be able to understand that. Will it be something where you're able to actually live off of one income rather than 2 incomes, for example? These are all things to consider before you embark on this journey. These are all things to consider before you embark on this journey. I would highly recommend that you do some studies, that you have a good understanding of what to expect if you're taking this journey, and of course, be sure to commit, because this is something that requires a lot of effort and a lot of hard work. So typically, people who achieve this tend to be able to retire around 45. Now, they've put enough in their pot since they started working, maybe from the age of 16. They've put that money into their pension pot, and they're in a place now at age 45 where they've been saving probably for about 30 years to be able to say, okay, I am at a place now where I can actually retire early. Now, it doesn't mean that they're going to retire and travel the world. It just might mean that they're going to retire and not have to work as full-time as they were before. So, for example, I've seen people who go into multi-level marketing at this stage in life. So they're able to generate income by other means that actually supplements the income from their pension because they stopped working so early compared to the pension age. Now, one of the things that I want to touch on, for example, is the fact that this is not something that I would be able to do. And it's not something that I would recommend you do if you are not able to manage yourself and manage your budget effectively. Ladies and gentlemen, I've seen people live in the mountains. It's a beautiful view, but it may be so far away from everyone else where you could actually get to a place where you're wondering whether this is something you want to continue. So think long and hard before you commit to this, guys. Now, if you are someone who has a family, you also need to make sure that your family is committed to living this way. Because the worst thing you can do is decide that we're going to do this, move everyone away, and then all of a sudden they become teenagers and they're like, not doing it anymore, Dad, I'm out of here. So just make sure that this is something you can commit to and that your family will commit to, so you don't end up living somewhere where you're all alone because your family doesn't want to be. Now, finally, I found that this actually works for people primarily who do not have children. Now, I mentioned the teenagers growing up earlier, but just bear in mind, if you know that you're not going to have kids, this might actually work for you because it's just the 2 of you. It's the adults. So it might just be you by yourself. And I've seen it work so well with people who do not have children. So it's definitely an option, a way to be able to live a lean life, live on those ramen noodles if you need to, and then be able to retire at the age of 45 and live the rest of your life, albeit not fat fire, not having holidays or travel or all of those things, but not having to answer to the boss. Now, I'm going to recommend a few books that actually address lean fire, and I'll post them here and here at the end of the video. But I would encourage you, do your research, look into this properly, and then comment below and tell me if you are a lean fire expert. Thank you so much, guys, and I will see you on the next one.